Well, it's that time again, that time when we walk into our local pregnancy clinic, look around and wonder why in the world Elizabeth Warren thinks these places should be shut down. We're your hosts, Greg, Ken, I'm Chris, and this is Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar. Hey, Gavin, can you turn my headset up just a little bit? That would be awesome. Thank you. I think that's what it is. Yes. That's
Fixed.
So much better.
Finally.
Yes. My headset.
Yes.
It was just down too low. So nobody knows what we're talking about at this point. I don't really care. So, Ken, you start us off with a verse of scripture here. It's pretty fitting. It's found in Exodus chapter 20, verse 13. You shall not murder. It's pretty simple.
4 words. I like it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a pretty good motto for, like the pro-life movement. I think it's going to get a lot of traction. People that'll be great.
Good start.
Yeah, it's
Good
like,
start.
hey, welcome to prolife.com, where our motto is, you shall not murder. What do you think?
It works.
I think it works good. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's not. We are privileged today to have with us a friend of the show, a friend of mine. We love Dr. Rick, and we last interviewed him in March 31st. That was before the SCOTUS decision, and so we had the SCOTUS decision kind of rolled out, and now here we have Dr. Rick Hawk from Open Arms Pregnancy with us today. And Dr. Rick, how are you doing, sir? Thank you for being here.
I am wonderful. Thank you guys for having me over. This is always a highlight of my day.
Always, huh? You're so kind. You're so kind, Rick. I really appreciate it. It's the highlight of our day, too.
For sure.
Yeah, every Monday, it's the highlight of our Monday, for sure. So, yeah, Roe is dead, Rick.
Roe is dead.
Yeah.
Did you think in your lifetime you'd see that?
I think I did. I wasn't sure how old I'd be.
Right. We all hoped, but
I'm closer to the end of the spectrum than I am to the beginning. But, it was well due.
Yeah.
Overdue.
it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Have you guys had a lot of conversations about it over there? As far as what that actually means for us here?
We have, especially when the decision was first leaked, then there was the conversation about, is that legitimate? Was it just meant to give us hope and get us all riled up, and then something else would happen? And certainly the expectation is that the leak itself was to foment opposition on the part of the Supreme Court justices that had voted for it. And it did, but not enough for ultimately that to still be the decision, that happened. And then that first weekend, really just wondering, okay, what does this mean for us in terms of safety and security and the response across the country, and then maybe secondarily wondering about the women that come into our clinic that are still faced with these decisions, knowing that their options in the state of Idaho are disappearing and needing to travel across the border to the occupied state.
Yeah, the occupied state, I like that. Yeah, it was interesting, and so much misinformation too about the idea that let's freak out now because abortion's illegal because they overturned Roe, but really all that happened was the Supreme Court gave the power back to the states where it belongs. And I was really proud of our Supreme Court for making that decision. And it kind of sets up a good precedence for a lot of the things coming down the pipe that we won't get into here today. Right. But interesting stuff. So you guys have moved into your new facility over there in Hayden, right?
We are in our new facility. We opened on the 2nd of May, so we've been 3 solid months there now, and it's been amazing. Not only so there's just been great. There was great anticipation of the move on the part of the ministry team and the board and the supporters, and then in the run-up to being able to open, I mean, people literally just coming out of the woodwork saying, "Hey, what are you guys doing? Who are you?" Once it was built, every week there's a story about somebody driving past on their bicycle, or people walking into the front door going, "Hey, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, what is this place?"
Yeah. We've even had a couple people that have driven on the south side and seen the boutique through the window and thought we were a new thrift store. It gets them in the building, and we have conversation with them. So
that's funny.
So yeah,
that's funny.
And let me just add that in the 3 months that we've been open, the number of people that are coming to us for care has just skyrocketed. In fact, I know your readers won't be able to see this chart in front of me, but in 2022, you can see in 3 months here where we were consistently. In fact, just as one example, since 2017, in the month of July, we've averaged about 70 appointments, and in this July, we were at 132.
Wow.
It's just fascinating.
Pretty nearly doubled.
It's just fascinating, and the numbers continue to climb in every measurement and every metric, whether it be donors or supporters or volunteers or clients and patients.
What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think some of it is the visibility of our own place. In the past, really for the last 20 years, we've always leased the space, so we've been in someone else's building. In this case, when we were down on Lincoln across from the medical center, we were in a dental office. And unless you knew it was there or you saw the little bitty sign on the highway, you wouldn't know we were there, right? And now there's no doubt that we're there. I mean, we have a 1-acre parcel. We're on the corner of Wayne and Prairie, so lots of visibility, hundreds and hundreds of cars every day going past us. And then if the kicker, I guess, is the sort of the unknown is the post-Roe fallout and the people that are coming in. And wanting to find hope, you know. In fact, I would add that one of the things we started this year is we were considering a simple way to describe what it is we do, because when people ask us, so like, what do you guys do in a pregnancy center, in a clinic? Instead of going into all the details about, well, we provide this service and this kind of class and this support and all the rest, we've summed it up in 3 words: hope, love, and life.
But that does not line up with Elizabeth Warren's definition of what you guys do.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, apparently she believes that you guys torture and lie to women. So that's not part of your vision statement.
And I would just publicly say that we'd love to have Elizabeth over if she wants to.
Tour the facility, see what's going on.
We'll cater in some lunch and we'll spend some time with her. And I think she'd leave with a different perspective. I really do.
We hope
Maybe
so.
we could have her on the podcast too.
Yeah, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
There you go. So yeah, I think Elizabeth is emblematic of a lot of people in Washington, D.C., right, that are living in a bubble and don't have a real sense for what's going on in the real world. And in this case, the real world is women and men that are facing unplanned pregnancies. They're looking for hope. They're looking for somebody that's got hope. And so when they step through our doors, we can meet them in a loving way. Not only our ministry team, but ultimately the foundation is Christ, the love of Christ. And then that result is life. And that life could be a woman who decides to carry to term and that baby lives. Or arguably even more important is the transformation that happens in that woman's heart when she accepts the Lord. Comes to know that Jesus is the answer to not only this issue, but every other issue in her life. So hope, love, and life. So if we're at a conference and we're in an elevator and you got 3 minutes to turn to the guy next to you and say, hey, this is what I do, it really synthesizes down into hope, love, and life.
Hope, love, and life.
Yep.
What else do you really need? So in doing that, you guys offer a lot of stuff. Now, we've talked about this before, but you guys have expanded some things. You're still doing the pregnancy testing, which is available. Is it a lot? All of this stuff is either free or low cost, right?
Right. In fact, for nearly 22 years, everything has been free. The only thing we've introduced now in terms of low cost is with our sexual transmitted infection testing and treatment. There's a lab fee that's currently covered by the patient. But I tell you, we've already had donors. We've had donors and supporters that have reached out to us and have said, we'd like to sponsor. We would like to scholarship. We'd like to be able to pay towards that so that the patients and clients don't have to have any of that. So and that's really just started last month in July, as we've stepped into this new service. So,
And that's way outside the bounds of pregnancy, right?
well, I wouldn't say way outside the bounds. I would say that it's, in fact, in our mission statement, when we talk about helping individuals make life-affirming choices through education, compassionate support, and pregnancy-related services, we see STI as pregnancy-related. Mm-hmm. Additionally, because a pinnacle of our mission statement is education, Chris, if I could add on to your previous question, one of the other things we're doing is getting back into the schools, getting back in front of students. So back in 2019, pre-COVID, we were actually in public and private high schools talking about sexual risk avoidance and healthy relationships. And then COVID closed everything. The woman that we had on the team decided to step away and homeschool her kids, so she pulled them out of public education. And so that's given us an opportunity to re-engineer, retool that job description. So we hired a nurse, a 4-year degreed nurse, who's come back now, joined our team in July. And right now she's building program. And we anticipate that this fall we'll be back in front of students, public and private high schools, as well as I have a commitment on the part of many of the pastors in the local community that have said, hey, we'd give you audience with our youth groups. So wherever there are students. So what's the point? That STI is a bridge from the schools back into the clinic. Because if we have a woman standing in front of a group of students and she's talking about our services, they may think, well, until I get pregnant, I don't need to come see you. But do you know the incident of STI is higher than the incidence of unplanned pregnancy in our community? It's just something people aren't talking about. So both the STI testing and treatment, as well as getting back in the schools, are really the two big things we're jumping into here this year.
Okay, so you do the testing, and then results come back negative. What do you do at that point?
So for the STI testing and treatment, we've got it scheduled through our week. So the test results, the sample goes out, the test results come back. They come back in for a second visit, and then dependent on the results, that then leads our nurses or our lay counselors to engage them in conversation about behaviors, good choices, all those sorts of things.
That's
so
good.
the
And the
more
treatment?
times, what's that?
I'm sorry, in the treatment as well?
Yeah, and the treatment as well. And so whether we're doing the treatment in-house or we're sending them out with a prescription, anytime you can get them in front of our team and you can have conversation, then you can advance, all the things that we want to share with them. That
Bringing Christ into that. That's great.
That'll help them in their future.
That's awesome.
Yes.
So the parenting education, what does that look like for you guys?
So we called the nurse a community nurse because we wanted the foundation of that role to be our bridge to the community and specifically to students. So the seminar or the training that we're building will present itself in terms of seminars. In the past, we did 3 and 5 day seminars where we'd go in either through a health class or through some other class and present sexual risk avoidance, healthy relationship through this curriculum, this national curriculum that we're using. Because you can't get in the schools. The public schools aren't going to let you in if you want to go in and talk about abstinence or if you want to go in and talk about Jesus. But abstinence and Christ are woven through the curriculum. So what happens is as you're helping them to understand about sexual risk avoidance, avoiding sexual relationships, doing things in the right order, striving for these other things and these healthy relationships, what we found back in 2019 was that the administrators and the principals and the others that we talked to came to this realization that, hey, we all want the same things for our kids, right? We want them to be healthy. We want them to make good decisions, grow up to be good citizens and all the rest. And often the science shows that when they do those things out of order, right, then they sort of bind themselves into this life that's almost predetermined, right?
Yeah.
You've heard these things, right?
Yeah.
So families that are in poverty, the cycles continue unless you do something to break them out, right? So it's very similar when it comes to healthy relationships and sex.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that you guys have always done that has been instrumental in helping women to make a choice as far as whether they're going to pursue life has been the ultrasound. That device has been instrumental in saving a lot of children's lives. You guys still do the ultrasounds, obviously.
Indeed, we do. Yeah, and that came into play early on. Open Arms started as a prayer group in 1997. In 2001, they had formed the organization, hired some staff, saw the very first patient, and in 2007, just 6 years later, they brought ultrasound in. So that technology has continued to show women what's going on in the womb since 2006. Hundreds of women a year that get to see that, and it immediately counters the argument, right, that it's just a blob of tissue or there's nothing here, and whether it be us or other organizations like Focus on the Family that are doing their part to reach out and to help women have access to ultrasound, because it really is a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes a big difference when you can go in and you can actually see that there is a life in there, that it's not just, I agree, not just a lump of cells like you were saying. Yeah, absolutely. What is the, so you guys are doing adoption support. What does that look like?
Right. So I think that we anticipate that the adoption support side of our ministry will actually grow now post the Roe decision, because we may find that there are women that decide they're not going to abort, but they're certainly not ready to parent. So I think we'll see that grow. We have a couple organizations in the local area that we partner with that ultimately will help women and men to walk through those decisions. But I think what's critical is that the women recognize, really, this isn't just two decision options, right? It's not just I'm going to be a parent or I'm going to abort. There are thousands of families, couples across the country that aren't able to have children that would welcome an opportunity to adopt. And it's fascinating if you were to step up 10,000 feet and just kind of look down at the couples that struggle to have children but would welcome an adoption, and then you have these other couples that have got children but see abortion as their first option. If we could continue to work to change their minds, I think the settlement there is let these children live. The Lord has a purpose and a plan for every one of them, and some of that purpose and plan might be that they're placed with a family that loves them and will nurture them. In fact, I would go so far as to say that this is something I've shared before, but all 5 of my sons are adopted, right? Mm-hmm. So 5 of our sons adopted from 4 different mothers that chose life instead of abortion. Oh. So my wife and I are living testimony to bringing children into our home that weren't ours biologically, but that the Lord is building that purpose and plan through adoption.
Yeah,
that's great. That is amazing.
That's one of the things that we've discussed here a couple of different times is like, what have we just talking about all the children that have been killed in the name of abortion. And was it like 63 million, 64 million, something like that now, since Roe v. Wade? And what our country and our world has lost in that process. Maybe one of those kids had the cure to cancer. Maybe one of those kids was our next global leader that was going to bring peace to different regions or whatever. There's no telling what we have just kind of eliminated from history.
And you've just expanded the conversation beyond our own country. I was reading an article the other day about China. Fascinating. And they've come to this realization, it appears through this one article, that their sort of no holds barred abortion has so decimated their country that now their birth rate is actually inverted, and they're going to sort of just die off if they don't turn that around and start having kids.
Isn't that something?
Isn't that fascinating? That But they've come to that realization now, and they're looking to change their policy so that abortion isn't as favorable, and that having children and raising children is.
That was kind of like their 2-child policy, right? Like
Yeah.
you couldn't have more than 2 children.
I think it was one at one point, and there was a lot of females getting aborted
Right.
because they wanted boys instead of
Wow.
girls.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. With that in mind, I've talked to several people who have their own kids, but they have talked about adoption, and in the process, the cost is outrageous. It's ridiculous in many of these cases. Do you see anything, or do you see how you guys could help if you convince a young lady to keep this child? What are some of the options that she has presented in order to have that child and have an adoptive family that is not, going to become poor because of that?
Right. No, Greg, I think that's a great question. And frankly, the whole topic needs further research and development. We're a couple levels removed from really seeing much of that, right? So consider you're working in the clinic, a young woman comes in, goes through her appointments, ultimately meets with our counselors, talks about her options, and then maybe she's, pretty well adjusted and recognizes early on abortion's not an option for her, but she's not ready to parent. So she gets linked up to an adoption agency early on. At that point, we're sort of on the peripheral to all the details. But I agree with you in principle that I think our country, if we could come to grips with these children that need homes and we could reduce those barriers like cost, I think we'd see a lot of that happen.
Yeah.
There's if you will, the adoption agency is really the middleman, right, between the child and the family that wants. And so, there's some costs there. I mean, they couldn't operate totally costless. But I don't know. We see ourselves running a parallel path with that, and we pray for that, and we do our best to convince women that is an option, and we're comfortable with the agencies that we refer to.
That would be key.
I think it'd be fascinating for you guys to bring on some people that are involved in the adoption industry in that entire arena, and just talk about, how do we connect the dots here between women that are getting pregnant and don't want to parent, and then this need that's out here, because I think it's a systemic thing in our country.
There is a bit of a disconnect between that. It's hard to draw a conclusive line between the person that wants to adopt and the girl who doesn't want to end the life of the child, but certainly can't afford or doesn't have the ability to be able to raise that child. So, there is a kind of a disjointedness between those connections, and it would be good to kind of highlight that. This is. Yeah. It'd be nice if it was a step 1, step 2, step 3.
Right.
You know what I mean?
A plan, a book.
What is
Here's what you
the
do.
barrier there? Is it cost-wise and just logistically? Is it legal expenses because they have to run such a gamut of getting
The right people.
parents' rights transferred? Why is that such a huge barrier? It didn't seem like there's nothing physical involved there in cost. Maybe some travel, but I've never gotten that.
Yeah, I think the last time I checked, like the average adoption costs like anywhere between $10,000 to $15,000.
That would be
that is
minimum.
not covered by
Yeah,
insurance.
that would be a minimum.
And that's always borne by the adoptive parents, correct?
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah.
I actually had a sister in Southern California that started an adoption agency, and what she did was she would find parents that wanted to adopt, and then find the young ladies that were pregnant, didn't want to keep the baby, convince them to keep the baby, and she would get the two entities together, get the adoptive parents and the young girl together, and the adoptive parents would basically take care of that young lady all the way through the pregnancy.
Adopt her.
Yeah, basically adopt her, and that worked out very, very well. She ended up,
bet.
going many years like that, but then ended up, selling the organization. But that always, to me, in the back of my mind, I was always going, man, that's perfect. That's how it should be.
Was it a nonprofit?
It was a nonprofit.
Imagine way.
Yeah. So the cost was minimal. It was still there, But the part that was kind of heartfelt for me was that the adoptive parents, it's almost like grandparents, you know. Like you said, they adopt the daughter, and then this, and it oftentimes there was a young man involved.
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know? So there's a lot of different ways of doing that, and I think personally the government stepping in screws that up most of the time.
Usually, if you let the private sector and the social sectors deal with that, they'll do a much better job of doing it.
Almost always.
Yeah. So there's a component here that just came to my mind that we haven't really discussed. A lot of times when we talk about these things, it's mom and baby, but a lot of times there's guys involved in this that are on both sides of that fence that are struggling in one way or another. Is that something that you guys deal with quite a bit, Rick?
Well, I'd say that it's a growing concern. Well, let me say it differently. So it's not a growing concern. It's always a concern. We recognize that it takes two in that relationship, and the science bears out that for years and years it's been the woman, right, that predominantly carries that burden, makes the decisions. And it's portrayed in every movie, right, where the guy drops his wife off or drops his girlfriend off, rather, at a abortion clinic or at a pregnancy center, and like figure this out, you know. And we, in the last few months, have been ramping up what we call our men's ministry portion of Open Arms, and we have some volunteers now on Tuesday and Thursday evenings when our clinic runs late into the evening, that will meet with guys and we'll talk to them. And in fact, we've got a guy who's a discipleship layperson at one of the local churches and does men's ministry and does some of that. And so he's really just bringing his skills and talents to our campus and meeting with guys. And so we started this again pre-COVID, and then we had a couple guys that were working Thursday nights with us. You know, they had families, they had day jobs, but they could come in the evening and meet with guys. And then and that fell apart mostly because of COVID, job reassignments. And so we're spinning that back up. But there's a bright future here as it relates to that. One of the organizations that we affiliate with nationally, known as CareNet, has an element of their organization that's heavy-duty men's ministry. And just last year, there was in Dallas, Texas, Tony Evans Church. Have you heard of Tony Evans? He had like 300 or 400 men that came from pregnancy centers and clinics across the country for this first ever sort of a Promise Keepers type men's focused event that was on helping men that come, you know, sort of building this groundswell of how do we reach and engage men. One of the things we're looking to do with the build out of the rest of our facility is build what we're calling a visiting pastor suite. And so in this visiting pastor suite, what we would do, so as an example, let's take Chris, we would run you through some training that's specific to guys that are facing the types of decisions that we work in. And then a couple times a month, you'd bring your laptop and you'd come hang out at our place and do your church business in your visiting pastor suite. But if a guy was to present with his girlfriend, you would break away and have an opportunity to talk to him. See, the model over the last few years has been such that we're trying to get guys, and then they would just sit in the clinic and wait for a young man to walk in. Well, really the good ones, if you will, are out trying to hold down a couple jobs and all. They're just not coming. You know what I mean? And so, but more importantly is that the frequency with which these men show up to the clinic is just unpredictable. Yeah. So it's almost like you have to play zone defense, right? You've got to have a guy, a pastor, a layperson who's had the training, who's in the clinic at some point during the 28 hours we're open during the week. And when a guy presents, we got you covered, and we have that conversation. Additionally, in the build out of the rest of the facility, we're looking to create a common space where then maybe we would get all the guys that are currently involved in ministry and conversation, the young men that present, to have them come to a once-a-month event, right, where we're watching football, eating pizza, playing foosball, whatever, like a small group or a life group where you're talking and you're building camaraderie. What we've found with women is when you bring them together in these support groups, it's like, oh, wow, you've got a toddler, I've got a toddler, we can learn some things from one another. Well, don't you know these guys could learn things from each other, too, if they had a friend to talk to, you know, facilitated by a trained pastor or layperson. So we're excited about that. as we look to raise money and build out the rest of the facility this year. And I anticipate by next year, we'll be bringing groups of guys together and helping them.
That's great.
They've made early decisions that they're supporting their girlfriend, but they need people to come alongside them and support them.
For sure.
Yeah, that's an important part.
Yeah.
Now, another one of the things you guys do is sexual abuse support. How does that pan out in what you're doing over there at the clinic?
So we're partnered with an agency out of Spokane that offers that. Those are all very confidential, private, as you would imagine, right? And those sessions are confidential, one-on-one with our lay people, and they help to process through the trauma that these women have faced. Many of the women that have chosen abortion, unlike what our opposition would say, they don't just quickly forget about it, right? It stays with them for years, impacts them physically, emotionally, spiritually.
Absolutely.
And to give you one example, so most recently, one of our lay counselors, we call them advocates, had been working with this woman through a program to help her come to grips with the decision she'd made. And in our new facility, you may not know, we have a memorial garden. So we have an open-air memorial garden in the corner of our facility with gazebo and umbrella and trees. And
looks nice.
It's beautiful. And as the plant life continues to grow and we continue to add, it's just a wonderful place for them to go and to have conversation and to pray. And so they finished their 8-week session in this memorial garden, and she released her baby into Jesus's hands. And basically as a final step in this grieving process, and then just recognizing that she's going to see her child again someday. But so whether it's post-abortion support or sexual abuse, all of these things really are very tightly connected. And we have people that are ready to come alongside those women, help them through.
Yeah. So bottom line, you guys are doing a truckload of stuff over there. I mean, just all kinds of things.
And we've been really blessed with our volunteers. Really, we say that volunteers are the lifeblood of the organization. We've got our staff members, but really the organization moves forward on nearly 70 volunteers that we see through the week, many of which are in that clinical realm, meeting with men, meeting with women, working through the medical side, and then what we call support and service, which is all of these classes and support groups and the things we've been talking about. And the volunteers just continue to present. We used to do what we called volunteer orientation once a month when we were in the old location. We had to increase that. We did it every other month. We've had to increase that to once a month, and we have 30 to 35 people a month that come sit in our conference room and ask, how can I get involved?
You mentioned the clinic was open 28 hours a week.
Yes.
Are you looking to expand that?
So in the old location, we were 22 hours a week, and we recognized primarily that we needed more evening hours. So when we moved, we expanded our evening hours. So now we run our clinic until 7 p.m. both Tuesday and Thursday nights. And then we open earlier on Thursday. Previously, we didn't open till 4:30. Now we open at 1. So the 28 hours, we studied that over a number of months, tried to match our desire for hours with what the community appeared to need, and then ensuring we had volunteers and staff that could cover. All 28 hours that we're open, we've got medical professionals on the campus so that we can offer those medical appointments as well as the support and service. So I think for now we're going to hold steady at 28. Frankly, we've just been there 3 months. You can see from the numbers that people are coming in.
Yeah.
And as I said, the volunteers, just the period January through July of this year, we're a 16% increase in volunteers from last year, 2021, and the numbers just continue to climb. I have a board meeting every month, and at the last meeting, I shared with the board a handful, there might have been 6 or 7 of these, hey, I've become aware of the Supreme Court decision. My name's Nancy. I'm a mother of 4. I've got a little extra time in my week. I'd like to. You got time in your week?
Mother of 4.
Yeah.
Time in your
wow.
I mean, it's that kind of. It's that that
important
quality
to
of a
people.
person,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That they're saying, look, I can find time. I've got time. I want to come see how I can be of assistance to what you guys are doing. So we're just absolutely thankful to the Lord for the volunteers that continue to present, and not just lay people, but nurses with advanced degrees popping in. I had a physician a couple months ago that said, hey, I'm retired and I'm in the community. What can I do for you? So it's just fascinating. So the Lord has placed us strategically in that corner. You know, we're now in Hayden because we're just north of Prairie. That's taken a little getting used to. People are so familiar with the pregnancy center in Coeur d'Alene. It's that's our history now. But whether they're donors or supporters, volunteers, clients and patients. Lastly, on the finance side, just last month we had 122 first-time donors. These are people that have never given any money. And we're seeing that kind of an increase month after month as people say, we want to be a part of the important work you're doing.
That's encouraging. It's almost like Christians are actually stepping up to the plate, which is something that we have talked about before. Is, this is a time where, Christians can actually kind of put their money where their mouth has been for over the last, couple of decades. And man, what a blessing.
And Chris, as you said, the fight's not over, right? The Supreme Court decision only rolled the decision back to the states. We know that nearly half of the states want to become zealots for abortion, become sanctuary states and all the rest. And the other half are a little more in tune with, certainly with our position
with what you're doing.
and with what we're doing. And But when you consider the battle line here for us, it's just a couple miles to the west, right? And you cross over into Washington, and just helping. We see a part of our mission is to make ourselves so well known through marketing and messaging that women will give us a chance. It's like, well, let me go check that clinic first before I go schedule that abortion. And that's all we want is a first opportunity to talk to them, because we're convinced that if they receive all of the information and know that we're there and we can walk alongside them, then we're confident. I mean, the Lord's on our side, right? And if the Lord's with us, who can be against us?
Yeah.
So.
If they walk in and they can walk out knowing that they are loved and knowing that they're going to be supported, they can have the confidence required to be able to just carry through with the pregnancy.
Right. Yeah, that is it. That's it. They're not alone. There's somebody else there that's willing to walk with them on this journey.
Yeah, yeah. Now, we joked earlier about Elizabeth Warren and kind of what she had to say. And I think most people who are pro-life are kind of familiar with what she had talked about. But to make I'm not going to quote her, but basically she had said that a lot of these pregnancy centers that are out there that are offering these ultrasounds and things of that nature are lying to women and are torturing them. And it brings to light that, there are a lot of pro-abortion folks out there that just really have no clue what goes on in these pregnancy clinics. Like, they've never actually seen what's happening there. I mean, there's no lies being told to these women. There's no torturing that's happening, but that hasn't stopped an increase in kind of pro-abortion attacks that are taking place. And in fact, since August, or as of August, Catholic Vote has tracked 63 pro-abortion attacks on pregnancy resource centers in 26 states since the Dobbs decision leak. Not the Supreme Court decision, but since the leak. Like you were saying, it's like as soon as the leak happened, there were conversations that were taking place everywhere. Seattle and Portland have experienced 4 attacks each. There's none yet in Idaho or in Montana. In 2021, by comparison, there was only 1 such attack reported in the entire year. So I don't even know what percentage that is. I mean, it's exponential in scope.
It's basically declaration of war.
Exactly. Right. According to the same source, the attacks appear to be organized under the umbrella of 2 domestic terror groups, Jane's Revenge and Ruth Sent Us. Have you guys been talking about these kind of things? Is this something that is on your radar? Without getting into too many details about what you guys are doing for security, I mean, how is this affecting your overall work?
Yeah, we're certainly talking about it, and we've had a broad conversation across all the major stakeholders in the organization. The one thing that makes safety and security best is when you don't talk about the details, right?
Yeah.
But suffice it to say that we've expanded beyond our own walls to learn how best to monitor and manage and respond to things that might happen, both in the physical realm as well as information, negative information online and those sorts of things. And so we feel very blessed that we live in this part of the country. The first weekend after the official decision, it was the strangest thing. That Friday, I was actually driving out of town on my summer vacation.
Yeah.
And of all the days for that to happen, but we had planned, I usually like to joke that my Boy Scout background, has always prepared me for these things, but I was never in the Boy Scouts. But I did work for the Department of Defense for 35 years and 26 years active duty military, so I've got a little bit of planning in me. It's kind of in my blood. So we had prepared before I departed for who was going to be the next in charge and what were the lines of communication and how were people engaging with us. We had a couple of churches that came down that weekend and provided neighborhood watch and kept an eye on the facility. Our team had their head on a swivel, as they say, see something, say something. We were talking about everything. And as I said, we've got physical measures in place to help us see at places and times when we're not even there. So all that said, we've also coordinated deeply in dialogue with our friends and partners in Washington, Montana, southern Idaho, northern Idaho up here in the Sandpoint area, and just trying to get a sense for what's going on in your community, right? Because stuff going on, in Ohio or Indiana or New York or Florida, that's all part of the country, but it's so far removed from us. And there are various aspects of how people run these facilities. But when you get up here in the Pacific Northwest, it just feels like we're all family, and there's a little closer knit there. So we've been monitoring and talking to one another, cross-talking, these sorts of things, sort of being on the lookout, if you will, to use the BOLO term, for what's going on in your neighborhood, what's going on in our neighborhood. And at the same time, we very much recognize, to a person on the team, we recognize that this is a spiritual battle first and foremost. Yeah. So there isn't a single day that goes by that clinic's not open that we don't start the day in prayer.
Amen.
And so the entire ministry is the Lord's ministry, and we're just honored to be able to serve there. And so we recognize that we're not immune, that something could happen. We know the difference between something that could happen to our people and something that could happen to our facility, and we've got appropriate measures in place to manage and monitor and respond to that as well. So I'm getting ready to go to a conference here in another week where people from across the country will gather, and I anticipate we'll hear a lot more about what they've faced, what measures they've got in place, those sorts of things, because I don't think that's going away. In those two organizations you mentioned, we've seen stuff online. We know people that have received letters, and so we're just doing our due diligence to try to stay on top of that. Again, thankful for the part of the country we operate in, but not so naive to think that we're not in somebody's crosshairs. We have had a couple Google reviews, sort of, scratching the surface of wanting to pin a dark light to us or whatever, and we just responded appropriately to those. And those, in fact, I'll give you one example. There was this one person that, so we've got dozens and dozens of reviews on Google, and we'd been riding at a 5.0 for as long as anyone can remember. And now we're down to 4.9 because somebody posted a 1 star with no comments. So, for most of us, if you go to a place and you got 1-star service, you're going to want to tell somebody what was wrong with your visit and no comments, right? Nice. So then we were immediately suspect, right? And so we pulled this person up online, and it turns out this person has problems with his or her pronouns as well, and wasn't sure if he's a she or she's a he. So you can learn a lot about people from their profile on Facebook. And so we were going, okay, this just is fodder for this person. And they're probably, they've either got time on their hands to be able to do that, or they're being paid by somebody to go and post negative reviews. So we just take that with a grain of sand and keep moving. As I told Ken the other day, really our focus is every day doing the work of the Lord, hands and feet, right, meeting the needs one person at a time. The devil would want us to be so distracted by all this other stuff that we get off mission and we're just chasing after people, trying to convince people, no, we really are good. We're good people. The Elizabeth Warren stuff,
Yeah.
But you know what? Every day that we don't focus on that and let other people chase after that, and we focus on the people we're meant to serve and care for, then that's a win for us.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but I like how you guys are not all just living in denial of what's going on. Yeah.
Your listeners wouldn't necessarily know that, but in my background, with that many years in the service, I had a chance to deploy to Iraq in 2006, and I was actually the security and anti-terrorism officer for an Air Force theater hospital in Balad Air Base. So I know a little bit about that whole way of thinking.
Yeah.
And really, it's just fascinating how the Lord has knit our team together. So here I am at a time such as this, right? Because many of my team members don't have that kind of a background, and they might be more susceptible to things happening. But when you knit us all together in the fabric of the team that we have currently, it's just fascinating what the Lord's allowing us to accomplish.
That's amazing.
It is amazing what God does when he brings things together like that, and just you look back on it. You may not see it like right at first, but then you look back on it a year later and you're like, wow, all these little things that happened to bring me to this point in time where I needed to be. It really is amazing sometimes, like what he does. So what's your opinion of the Idaho trigger law?
So if by the trigger law you mean the law that was due to go into effect 30 days after the Roe decision that says all abortions are illegal?
Yes.
I think I'm for it, and I think that as an organization we're for it, because ultimately we would love to see all abortions illegal, right? I think on one end of the spectrum, if you go back a few years ago, it was like it was allowed at a federal level. And then you come through Roe, and now what the states are doing, and then even in Idaho, the whole abolitionist movement, right, to get to the point where there would even be more stricter rules and such in place. Whichever of those, whether it be the trigger law or other things that our legislature is dealing with and that our populace has to respond to, ultimately for us, it's about it all come. I remember one time I had a pastor that told me all ministry is local, right? Well, all pregnancy care support is local. Meaning it's just one person at a time, helping them make the right decisions. If this person's honestly considering abortion and they can't get abortion in Idaho, crossing the state line into Washington it's not like it's a Herculean task to get there, right?
Right.
How many of us cross the border already to shop in the valley or do this or that, or we have family and friends that come over? So what we want in the midst of this is just that first chance with that young woman to be able to talk to her about her options before she makes the decision. And if anything, maybe the urgency's kicked up a little bit as she's trying to make a decision faster. But really, you guys would know that the only two abortion facilities that even existed in Idaho were down in Boise and Twin Falls. So you had to travel 8 hours to get there. Frankly, they're going 30 minutes across the border if that's what they're seeking. They weren't driving south. So,
who was it? The mayor of Boise that said that Boise was going to be a sanctuary city for abortions? Yeah.
And that's just fascinating, isn't it? Because we generally think of Idaho being this red conservative state, and there's these pockets. I lived in Texas for a number of years, and it's just disappointing that although there are people on both sides, but it's like the blue starts to creep in, doesn't it? The state capital, the big cities, the metropolitan areas. And I guess it's the same with Idaho here. Right?
It's always interesting to me, not to get off on too much of a political kind of rant, but it's always interesting to me how the science of that works. How when you have large groups of people that assemble together in one spot, they tend to have more liberal ideas. And then when you have more suburban, even rural kind of communities, they tend to be a lot more conservative in their ideology. It's just human nature is funny to me on a sociological level of how that all kind of plays out. And that's really obvious even in like Idaho. You know, I mean, it's like you just go right outside of Boise and it's like you're going to find, you know, people who are just as conservative as we are up here.
Yeah.
Then you cross that city line and it's like all of a sudden, you know.
Yeah.
It will be interesting to follow that a little more closely and see what happens to that city and those officials as time moves on. You know, what they're continuing to try to do there in the midst of a state that's absolutely in opposition to what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
we've
will be
had-
interesting.
Had a lot of political interviews over the last several months prior to the elections and post-election. And I tell you what, I had no clue how convoluted and how hard it was to be in politics.
Yeah.
I thought it was simple,
Yeah.
you know?
It's interesting because even though this bill passed the Supreme Court 3-2, and now the DOJ is suing for the bill and all of that kind of stuff, it was interesting. We had a conversation with Heather Scott last week that's airing this week, and we asked her about the abortion bill, and she was not a big fan of it. She said it was really poorly written and it probably needed to be challenged. Which kind of shocked me because at first, because you don't find many people that are more anti-abortion than Heather Scott is. But yeah, the bill just seemed to be like really poorly written. And she has been a proponent of this kind of intention-based bill. Scott Herndon wrote a bill that was like that, and she put it through, or has tried to put it through a couple of different times, and it's basically abortion is legal. We've defined abortion or illegal, and we've defined abortion as this, unless in the case that there is an intent to save the mother's life and the death of the child as a result of it. It's kind of defined differently. What do you think of that kind of thing? Do you think there's a danger in having that type of permissive idea as far as doctors abusing that?
You know, I don't know that I'm necessarily an expert. I like Greg's response about how convoluted politics is. I think to a person in our ministry, we're going to focus in on the things that we can bring positive effect to, and we're going to leave politics to the politicians. How many times have we heard bills that are trying to be passed with titles that would purport that they're good things when in fact it's just filled with wickedness, but they've been given a title because the public at large, we're busy working our jobs, raising our families, and doing life, and so we don't have that level of time like Heather Scott and others do. So I'm thankful to the Lord for people like Heather and Scott and others that can really burrow into some of the details. And I'm not to say, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the general populace ought to be have our head in the sand. But I think there's only so many hours in the day, and you've got to figure out when I stand before the Lord someday, I don't want him to go, you could have done so much more if you hadn't gotten wrapped up in knowing the language and all these bills. It's just like, that's just not my forte.
Yeah.
And I'm going to focus in, and I'm going to drive and lead my team to focus in on the things that we can do. And because there's nothing more powerful than watching a woman who's come in absolutely abortion-minded, abortion-vulnerable, that walks out having chose life, knowing that she's got a support system. She has people that are there with her. Some of you may actually get that text message that we send
Yeah, I get it
in
all the
real
time.
time, where we can be praying for the interactions that's happening. And so that's exciting. I think that the job's not over, the fight's not over. Roe was just a step in the continuum, and I applaud the efforts on the part of our politicians and others that are willing to continue to push this thing down the field.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Having people like Heather Scott and Scott Herndon in there, we need to support them because we don't have the hours in the day to
Yeah.
figure all this stuff out.
Yeah, but in the interim, you got to deal with the individuals that are caught up in all of that,
Sure.
and you're going to have ladies that are going to be coming in that are going to have doctors that are going to tell them, it's like, well, your mental health is at risk. It's like this could be a hazard to you. We need to save your life, so to speak, and it's a weird thought that you might have to deal with some kind of philosophical dilemma between a doctor and the clinic, but it is a distinct possibility.
Sure.
That'll be something that you guys will have to take on.
Yeah, and even if Heather and Scott and others were successful in outlawing it totally in our state, right? Well, as long as there are other states that join us, then women can make decisions to go across state lines. And some of these sanctuary cities, right? I mean, it's like they're enticing people to come to their state, right? We'll pay your travel cost. We'll do this and do that. And so, but even if there was this mighty move of the Lord and abortion was illegal and unconscionable in the entire country, it wouldn't take away our mission, because we're still helping young people with unplanned pregnancies. And so, if anything, abortion wouldn't be an option now. You could parent or you could adopt. And maybe that would be the thing needed to really grow the adoption side of this equation.
Yeah.
And then, the whole support and service side, right? People come in, they've made the decision to parent. Well, when you leave the hospital, there's not an owner's manual with your first child. I mean, how do you learn these skills? How do you learn how to do things? So we come alongside those people through education and training and instruction and the like to help them learn to parent, right? And to meal plan and budget plan and do all these different things, because in many cases it's children raising children, right? I mean, we sit here now at many generations advanced and think about all the things you've learned. Well, I mean, when we were
some more advanced than others.
Easy boy.
Let's be clear.
when if we rolled back to being 15, 16, 18, 20 years old, you were hoping that people were teaching you things along the way.
We had a young lady that came to church here for a while, and she started her own ministry. She had gone to the hospital, pregnant, waiting to have a baby, and the baby did not live. And she walked out of the hospital totally and completely confused as what direction to turn. If that were to happen again, could we send them, direct them to you guys for help for something like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, whether it's a conscious decision to have an abortion and then realize you've done, that you've taken that step and you regret it, and then you can come for support and service, or we have miscarriage support where just very naturally, right, miscarriages happen, and people come to us for that support as well. I think it really comes down to having that relationship and that communication with our team, recognizing you don't have to deal with the issue alone, and then and then ultimately remember back to the hope, love, and life. Right? We, as we sit here today, recognize that Christ is the answer to all of our issues, but many of the women and men that come to us, they don't know Jesus. Right? Yeah. They might have gone to church when they were younger, or in my own extended family, I know of examples where kids got older and felt like their parents had been pushing religion down their throat, right? And so they left and they didn't want anything to do with it. Well, the prayer continues to be that someday they'll turn back around to the Lord. Somebody told me once, it doesn't matter how far you've run from the Lord, it's only one step to come back.
Yep.
And so to answer your question more directly, there are lots of services and support for no matter what they're going through. And I would encourage you and your listeners, as they become aware of people like that, people that need help and support, send them our way.
Okay.
Give us a chance to talk to them.
So as we come, we're going to do last words here in a minute, but before that happens, I want to get kind of like just kind of an overview of four different things. First thing is like, what is Open Arms' most pressing immediate needs right now?
So that's a fascinating question, because in many ways we are so supremely blessed. I mean, we just moved into this brand new facility that the donors have been gracious to build. That's really a culmination of 20 years of ministry, and we see that now as a platform for the next 2 decades of service. I would say we've got first-time donors, we've got volunteers, we've got staff and ministry team. We're all rolling up our sleeves, ready to engage our community. We do have a portion of our building that we're looking to raise money for to finish. The entire building's about 9,700 square feet, and there's about 3,300 of it that's going to be an event center, these community rooms, and that visiting pastor suite I was talking about. Let me just camp for a minute on this event center concept. So that's a need that your listeners could take a hold of, because as we build that out, that will give us a chance to do seminars, trainings, and conferences in that space for upwards of 80 to 100 people. And our community nurse the other day had a great idea. She said, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to build this space out so that we could bring the school nurses from every school in North Idaho and do a seminar or a training where we cater food and we get their attention, talk about who we are and how we can partner with them, so that when they, as a school nurse or a PE teacher or somebody, becomes aware of a person in their school, we can have that bridge already built. They can, have them come to Open Arms. So I would say, Chris, our needs most currently are prayer, right? Continue that your listeners would continue to pray for us. Always the opportunity to volunteer. If someone wants to come be part of the team, we have monthly orientations they can plug into. And then financially, we're looking to raise money to build out the rest of the building, just to continue to advance the ministry the Lord's got us doing.
Okay, and then if there are groups that want to support you, first of all, we have several community leaders and several people who own businesses and things. How would a business contact you to be able to get started to help support you guys?
Right, so the contact could either come through email or phone, and that's info@realchoicesclinic.com, or our standard line into the organization, 208-667-5433. And then depending on their interests, we could link them into community events. We could link them into a partnership as it relates to different things that are going on in the clinical setting. So there's lots of opportunity. We just came through a baby bottle boomerang campaign, something we've been doing for 18 years. And we had over 80 churches and over 70 businesses that used that 6-week period to be able to raise funds for the viability of the organization. So we have a fall event on the 7th of October, and this week we're sending out sponsor letters to businesses that want to sponsor certain parts of that event.
Nice.
So there's opportunity there, and with that sponsorship, you'd get tables and seats so you can send some of your people to come be part, attend the event. Mm-hmm. So, Chris, it's almost unending in terms of ways to be involved. Start with a conversation, that email or that phone number, and we can direct you accordingly.
If you're a church that has not been involved with Open Arms at any level, and you would like to get started getting involved with Open Arms and helping with this kind of struggle, how would it be the same process for getting in touch with you guys, or how would you like to handle that?
Certainly the same way to get in touch. It's fascinating, though, because within the church arena, we're building out a program right now to give church leaders an opportunity to come to our new facility, get a presentation, learn about our history and our current day and what our vision is for the future, and tour the facility, meet the team, and talk about how they might get involved. So we early in the year, what we were doing was we were in more of a shotgun approach. We were contacting churches saying, hey, we want to come talk to your people. We want to come on a Sunday, do this and that. And you guys were gracious. You offered us your platform on a Sunday, and we came. But we realized about 4 months in that we could just continue in that shotgun fashion, but it would take us years to get
shit to everybody.
Yeah.
So instead we said, let's retrench, retool this thing, and let's bring pastors and leadership teams to us first, show them what we have to offer, and then talk about next steps. And one of those next steps might be, could we come talk to your congregation? It's not to say that any congregation we talked to previously weren't interested, but we think there's more bang for the buck or more return on that investment if we start with that cadre, that leadership team. So to your point about how can churches be involved, again, contact us through the email or the phone number, and we can invite you and your team in. Right now we've got Thursday mornings, really Thursday, the first half of the day before our clinic starts. that we're slotting in churches where they can come in and learn about who we are. And then they can make decisions. We know churches have choices. And so if you find that we're kindred spirits and this is something you want to be part of, then we can define what those next steps look like.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then individuals that may even not be affiliated with a church, how easy is it for them to get tied in to start volunteering?
Yeah, extremely easy. We once we've collected their information, we slot them into one of the monthly orientations, which gives them the A to Z of what Open Arms is, the volunteer opportunities that are available. Based on their skills and talents, they might want to come be part of our clinical team, work in the medical arena or support and service, or they may find that they have an interest in being engaged in events and community. We've got the North Idaho Fair coming up. We're going to be there for 10 days. We have volunteers that have just recently joined the team that are going to help us man the table and pass out magnets and
That's
stickers
awesome.
and stuff and talk about who we are. You know, they don't have to be experts in all things Open Arms. They just need to be a conduit through which people can learn about us. So tons and tons of opportunities for individuals to just contact us and let's start the conversation.
Yeah.
Earlier you mentioned a couple of other organizations that you've partnered with. Can you speak to those two real quick?
Were you talking about the national organizations we're affiliated
No,
with?
some local groups that we're actually here at Athol Baptist going to be getting involved with.
Well, what is that group? Help them out, Greg.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sorry,
Come on. It's not a trick question,
I
man.
was hoping he'd remember. What is it, Chris?
Embrace Grace?
Embrace Grace.
Yeah. So there's, one of the things we've learned early on, well before my tenure, and I arrived there early in 2019. So I like to say, I'm a glass half full guy, right? So I like to say that it's nearly 4 years, right? It could be closer to 3.5, but it's nearly 4 years since I joined the team. And we recognize that we can't provide organically everything that a woman needs, but we can have deep referral into the community for other things. In fact, we've talked to you guys about some of those things as well that you're building that are sort of multifaceted. So Embrace Grace is just one of those organizations, and there's many, many more. I wouldn't want I would want your listeners to know that the strength of Open Arms is not just what the Lord has knit together in that one building, but the nearly unlimited referrals into faith-based organizations and others throughout the community that can help that woman or that man, wherever they're at on that journey, to get them the support and the service they need. Because frankly, we're all on the same side, and we all want the same things, right? They come looking for hope. We want to offer them love, and ultimately life needs to result from that transaction. And so it doesn't have to be pride of ownership. It's all under our roof. It's about getting people connected.
Right.
Amen.
So they can live those lives the Lord has for them.
Amen. Yeah, we're pretty excited to be getting involved with Embrace Grace. It
Yep.
seems like a great system, great program. So anything we can do to help, we're always really intent on that. Well, Ken, what do you got? Any last words?
Man, I'm just so proud to live in North Idaho where we have a clinic like Open Arms available. You guys are doing amazing work in this area that, we're not highly populated. We're not a rich area, but we have richness of heart and we have richness of faith in this community, and it's really showing through. And so I'm glad to be a part of anything that we can do to help support you guys, make sure that it continues to grow and your influence expands, and really help see Idaho become a sanctuary state for life.
Yeah, for life. Amen to that.
Yeah, amen. Greg?
it just came to me. Open Arms Real Choices Clinic. It wasn't always that name. Open Arms and Real Choices. That was almost two separate entities, was it not?
So, let me just give you 30 seconds on the name, right? So way back in 2001 when they started, it was Open Arms Pregnancy Care Center. And so sometimes you'll see it Open Arms PCC. And then in 2007, with the advent of the ultrasound, we moved into the the medical arena. So they decided to keep the first part of the name anchored to their history and then add to it. So it became Open Arms Pregnancy Care Center and Real Choices Clinic, right? So the clinic is the medical denomination, if you will.
That just rolls right off the tongue.
It certainly does. So, but
All 17 of those words.
what we like to say is that Open Arms Pregnancy Care Center and Real Choices Clinic is affectionately known as Open Arms. And then affectionately, but extended, it's Open Arms Real Choices Clinic, because the emphasis really is on the medical leads, the support and service follows, and it's the medical that ultimately allows us to introduce people to that ultrasound and to the choices that, the real choices. Yeah, all three of those are real choices.
Yeah.
But once you engage with our team and learn about the consequences of each of those choices, the choices and the support that's available, the choices actually become clear.
Cool.
And
Yeah.
real.
Well, now that I've had that explained to me, I'll start donating more.
Yeah, about time. About time.
I did bring your giving history, Greg. I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
Okay. After the show.
Yeah, he brought your tithing statement.
No, it's absolutely wonderful to be involved in what you guys are doing. Just being a part of it, tears me up and makes me proud.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Rick, you got any last words for us?
So just super blessed, that churches like Athol Baptist are, in our corner, supporting us in the same way that we provide support and service to the women and men that come to us. We couldn't do that if it wasn't for churches like you guys that provide the resource. The very building we walk into every day is a testament to what supporters and donors said. We need this in our community, right? Or we could have been leasing space for another 20 years. And now the Lord's given us wonderful space, and we continue to draw vision for what's next, whether that be a maternity home, whether that be satellite clinics coming off of, if you will, like the mothership there. Reaching out, our mission statement talks about all of North Idaho. And we have people that come to us from these top 5 counties. But I think as we continue to make ourselves known and make known what the Lord's doing, we will see people coming to us, and we want to be that gateway for people to come to be able to make those choices.
Yeah.
So
Amen.
just continuing to do what we're doing and do more of it and continue to grow in a healthy way. Lastly, I would add, we've been praying as we consider our future and what other options are, that we would not get in front of the Lord. Like the Israelites of old, following the pillar of fire or the cloud, we need to follow what the Lord's doing and not get in front of the Lord and try to define our own direction. And so we're doing our best to stay in alignment and listen to what the Lord has for us. And knowing there's lots of good things out there, but we don't need to jump into all of those if it's not of the Lord or if the timing's not right. So,
Amen.
yeah.
Well, Rick, man, we appreciate it. Love having you, man, always. And we'll certainly have you back here in the near future. And just appreciate everything you guys are doing. You guys can be found on the web. We'll have your phone number all available and everything. And you guys are on Prairie and
Wayne,
Prairie and Wayne, right there by the Italian restaurant.
right across the street from Radici, Italian Bistro. And we're on social media as well. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. Our website, I would tell your listeners, if you go to our website, the front-facing portion is patient client, but you can log in, set up a profile, and you can see the back for all the donor supporter information like calendar and events and all the rest. So that's been warmly received as people become in real time at their leisure. They can tune into that and see what's going on in the organization.
Awesome. We'll appreciate it, man. Well, that about does it for us today. As always, thank you for joining us. If you have an idea for an episode that you would like to hear us investigate or a guest that you'd like to hear us interview, send us an email at 3p@atholbaptistchurch.org. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. You can find us on any platform where you can listen to podcasts. You can also find us on our website at atholbaptistchurch.org. Thank you, Ken, Greg, and Gavin, for helping us to produce this episode. Thanks to Athol Baptist Church and its members for generously supporting this ministry. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember, be brave, be bold, be loud. You can be a force for biblical morality in your world. Don't wait, don't be silent, and never, ever, ever give up. And with that, we are out.